Egypt, one of the birthplaces of civilization, from 1981 to 2011 was under the rule of Hosni Mubarak, a president that was re-elected 5 times during his 30-year rule. Truth be told, Mubarak was only re-elected so many times because he rigged the system in his favor. Practically speaking, he was a dictator. On January 25th, 2011, the Egyptian Revolution began. Citizens desired to overthrow Mubarak and his regime for a variety of reasons, and fights broke out between pro-Mubarak and anti-Mubarak forces, killing 846 and injuring 6,000. After a few failed attempts to stay in office, Mubarak soon resigned, and the constitution was soon suspended. Both houses of parliament stopped meeting, and the military took over until elections could be held in the summer. After more than a year of uncertainty and chaos, on June 24th, 2012, Mohamed Morsi was announced president in the first free election in Egypt's history. The country was ecstatic. However, 6 months later, the mood is quite different. On November 26, Morsi issued a decree that prevented the Egyptian courts from making a ruling on any laws or measures that he had passed since being in office. Furthermore, it stripped the court's power to call into question, make rulings on, and, ultimately, accept or deny the national constitution that was currently being constructed by a constitution assembly. To make things more problematic, the assembly working on the constitution was made up primarily of Morsi's allies from the Islamic Brotherhood. This decree sounded all too similar to the unfairness and dictatorship that the Egyptian people had worked so hard to overthrow in 2011. The decree sparked immediate, massive protests, including tens of thousands of participators and occasional violence. Protests took place in both Tahrir Square and in front of the presidential palace. Meanwhile, the constitution was being drafted by a group of mostly Islamists. The courts went on strike, liberal and Christian members of parliament left in anger, and even some of Morsi's own advisors left with a bad taste in their mouth. In order to get closer to the story, I interviewed a citizen of Egypt that I met on Twitter. He currently lives in Cairo, the capital. The majority of the rest of this video includes portions of my interview with him. First, I asked what the elections were like under Mubarak.
He won by 99% every time he ran for election. Even then there wasn't a choice, it was a referendum. You want Mubarak to take another term, or are you against it? And no matter who voted, too many people voted, he always came out with an approval rating of 99% and took his next term. So people were uninvolved in politics.
Right.
Never really affected him. I mean, it was something to bitch about, but it was something he tried to impact, tried to play a role in. Whereas now it's the exact opposite.
So I wondered, now that Mubarak is out of office, what was it like with all these protests?
I mean, we heard about what happened at the presidential palace when cleared out the supporters that were there from the night before. People just flocked down from every part of town. I got in a little minibus with 6-7 people, and we drove round and round and round until we found a way in, you know. And then we actually got 15 minutes to get there, but it just draws people, you know. For the first time, woke up and felt the coffee, you know, felt that they could have an impact on their lives.
Wow, having your voice heard in America is a given. I wanted to know more about these protests.
Have you or any of your friends or family participated in any of the protests or been there firsthand?
Oh, sure. I saw relatives whose fathers worked in the military their whole lives. So up until that point, they were completely against protesting. I saw relatives who bickered about Tahrir. I saw relatives who were for the former regime and people who all they dreamed about was water coming back, or that the revolution had never taken place in the first place. Everyone was in Tahrir. You had represented, I mean, all across the board, from little kids to old men, women, children, everything. I mean, my entire family.
And we sometimes think of protesters as the crazy ones. In Egypt, people from all sorts of backgrounds protest. Now to politics. Wonder what he thinks about Morsi.
I think he's losing supporters every day, and I don't think he has the legitimacy, the public approval to go forth with the referendum. I mean, we've seen diplomats and ambassadors revoke their support, saying they won't support a referendum that's still existing blood. I think he's just made it really difficult for himself. We're still waiting for him to give us any indication of how he feels, any reaction at all to what happened yesterday. I mean, it was huge. Egyptians fighting each other. That hasn't happened since the camel incident on February 2nd, 2011, and this guy hasn't even come out to comment.
Yeah.
What kind of leader leads his people? What kind of leader fails to come out when the country is torn apart?
He brings up a great question. If Morsi doesn't stand up for the Egyptian people, then who does? Does anyone?
The West doesn't support our push for democracy. I hate to imply that we depend on them, but the fact is they're a superpower, they're a huge superpower, and they control a massive amount of resources that this country's state depends on.
Right.
They have huge power, but they're just standing on the sidelines, sort of watching how it plays out. Until we get their support, the situation is going to continue to what it is,
Is he saying that Egypt's democracy relies on Western support? The idea is not too far-fetched. After all, the US did receive support from France and Spain during the American Revolution. But, hold on a second. I thought we were already allies with Egypt. Why aren't we supporting them?
And unless we get some support, I don't see us moving in that direction or beginning to move in that direction anytime soon.
Okay.
I just have to, I know this wasn't part of the question, but I feel the need to fit this in. I'm so disappointed by the U.S. government. When Obama was elected, we all felt, this surge of hope, inspiration. We actually sat and watched his inauguration speech. We were so overwhelmed with this sense of inspiration when he came and spoke from Cairo, told us he would support our push for freedom. But it turned out to be, a bunch of empty words. And he's supporting whoever's likely to be in power tomorrow and next week versus the people's will.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean
you can debate whether the majority is for or against Morsi, but it's very hard to argue against the fact that this decree is undemocratic in its very roots, and the U.S. has done nothing. And I'm talking about the U.S. government. They've done absolutely nothing to protect him, whereas they have so much power over him. The billions of dollars every year, soft power, hard power, you name it, and they've done nothing to ensure that. It's really disappointing.
So if the U.S. government, in whichever way, were to start supporting Egypt and becoming a more stable democracy, you think that would speed up the process very quickly?
It would help us in the right direction.
Right.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a growing sense, and I'm talking over the years, that the U.S. is not an ally. The U.S. doesn't care about our best interests. I'm talking about popular opinion, public opinion, is growing closer to that idea that the U.S. is an enemy, not an ally. They're an ally to government, but don't support the people. So the U.S. government needs to figure out if they're for democracy or for their short-term interests.
I'd say that's a fair question. I'm a journalist, so I'll be objective. But what do you think? Should the U.S. be supporting Egypt, or should it be focusing on its own interests? Is supporting Egypt as a democracy one of the U.S.'s best interests? Since this interview was conducted, a lot has happened in Egypt. The Constitution was put up for a vote on December 15th, and ultimately it passed, earning 63.8% of the votes. However, only one-third of the electorate voted, as the other two-thirds abstained, causing uproar among Egyptian people. They claimed that one-third is not sufficient to count as a democracy. Despite these complaints, nothing has changed, and as of December 28, 2012, the new constitution is in place. Reporting for PCNN, I'm William Queen.